know we're coming to the end of our holiday season here. We have had a good one. And we hope obviously, that your family has had as many good things happen to them in the year 2003, and we're looking forward to just the best of years in 2004. So let me take 1 second before we get down to shop. From Karen and I to all our friends, just been a great year. And we hope that your year has been as good as ours. Now, on the last tape, we were working on the cowlings for the A26, and I thought I'd put a couple of what I think are good tips when you're making a cowl. And here's what typically happens to most people. If you have the nose of any plane, it doesn't matter what plane it is or what design, and you have, let's just say this is the cowling edge. Well, what typically happens is, if you make this all balsa wood, what typically happens is, in time, this edge will start to look like this, and you get a sloppy edge. As the paint nicks or chips or whatever happens, and unless you have a different set of friends than I have launching planes. But anyway, one of the thoughts years ago that I had, and it just worked out perfectly, is I built a couple of planes. Let's just make this real easy. And what I did, I made the cowling, rough carved it, even if it's a wood cowling. And then this edge here, I just put a piece about an 1/8 of an inch thick of 64th plywood on this edge, and a piece of 64th plywood on this edge. Now what's nice is, and there's a great trick here, when you do this, if you're doing a typical plane, I'm going to show how we do this on the A26, but this would relate to a standard stunt ship. The first thing you do is you put, after you carve the cowl, lay the first piece of plywood on there. Now leave the other piece of plywood loose. Just put it in the gap. Press the cowling up in position, and you can slide that second piece around, and then just tack glue it or epoxy it or hot stuff it or whatever, so that when you take this cowl off, and the first time you build a plane and the cowl gets all mushy, and that's what happened to several planes, including Strega, if this edge is nice and solid, boy, that goes a long way toward, number one, keeping the cowling joint nice. And if you've ever noticed that appearance judging, many of the people that do it, the first thing they do is rub their finger on the cowl line. Well, two thin pieces of 64th plywood just butt joined together makes it as easy as pie. And that no matter how you do your cowlings, or edges, or wingtip edges, flap edges, anything where you want to keep an edge, putting in a piece of 64th plywood is almost no extra weight, extremely light, and gives you a nice edge to work off. In Les's case, he just got done making elevators with 64th plywood reinforcements. 64th plywood is a really, really handy material that you can do some nice stuff with, and we're going to be using more of it on the A26 very soon. On the last tape, this of course is a piece of 64th plywood. I didn't realize we already have a piece on here. One of the things you can do, and in this case we roughed this out with a carbide tool, but I want to get this down to, you only really need about 1/8 of an inch here, and it's just to make that nice joint. Now if we were to be putting this, let's pretend this was the fuselage, we could put that piece of plywood right in there, wiggle it around till it fit, tack glue it, and then just trim it off. And we have that really nice edge. When you see people have those really nice edges, the guy that was in the Walker Fly-Off last year, Constantine, he had some edges to die for. Not sure how he did them, but I know this way works for me. Now, to get this nice and even, you can do it by eye, you can scribe a line, but here's a trick that I've used over and over again. Just take a piece of 1/8 inch tape, and you can do this on any cowl edge. And you can lay yourself out a piece of 1/8 inch tape. There's a lot of ways you can use this. Difficult to do this looking through the camera lens too, believe me. But then being windy, it can be difficult at times. Anyway, other good news Elliot is now in San Francisco. He's got his first apartment set up. He'll be moving from that within a month. And just to get him settled in the country, and we hope we're going to see him in the near future. And he's got all his paperwork ready, so we're really hoping we're going to be having some fun in the very near future. Now what the 1/8" tape does, it acts as a guide whenever you're using a Dremel tool or a carbide tool or whatever. And it gives it that little final touch. First off, we're getting rid of a little more weight this way. We really only need this, but we'd like it to be nice and even, if nothing else, totally even. Now if we take the Dremel tool and we work right down to that edge of the tape, we can do that over by the sanding table, you can see we can get out a little more material, and also by making it relatively even, hope you'd have less of a stress riser. And we put so much time into making these light as a feather, I don't want to have anything on here that I don't need. A sanding drum is certainly one way to do this, and I have a lot of little gizmos with sanding drums and things like that, but the best one, if you can afford to go down to Home Depot or wherever these were bought, and I think they have them in Home Depot, they're carbide, so you never have to replace the sandpaper. And for cutting plywood, these are just about as good as it gets, and they do a beautiful job. Now I can use that tape as my edge. Believe it or not, the phone's ringing. Let me get the phone. My dear, no point putting the rest of this cut on with the phone ringing and everything here. I'm just going to continue this cut out even with the tape on all sides. And then when you look at a spot like where the bolt hole is, you don't need to have a big you need to go the same distance around the whole hole. So I'll use a hole template and just estimate that. But that's very much like, I think, how a real cowl would be mounted, or some of the structure of the cowl. And I know by having 3 points, it spreads the load nice. I think that's a real, and let's say somebody was building a BJ or a rare bear or a bear cat or something, that's a nice way to do the cowl. I never even thought of that, not only for the bombers, but for the other projects. Behringer's GB, things like that. We ought to make a mold for Behringer's GB. A lot of people building that plane. Of course, when you're done with the carbide tool, you have all these hairs and things hanging off everything. So one of the things I'm going to do is, do most of it off camera too, is really do a thorough sanding on this part now. Because what I want to do, it's got an 80, look at this phone today, jeez. Unbelievable. President Nixon. Gotta tell you, that last call, this you can't make this stuff up. They found a way, they captured Saddam a couple days ago, a week ago, whatever, and they haven't been able to find a way to get him to torture him or deprive him of sleep or whatever, and make him tell where the weapons of mass destruction are. Well, they finally found a way to get him to tell where the weapons are. They sat him in a room and made him watch windy videos over and over and over and over until he basically spilled the beans. Anyway, that right from our friends at Stuka Stunt. Anyway, that cowl, and that's what we've done to the two cowls in the meantime. That should give us a real nice mounting system. It's ultra light, and the next part of this is going to be to figure out how we want to put the finish on these, and that's a whole other issue. Now, whenever we ship out composite parts to customers, and these are going to Mike Costello, I include in a list of do's and don'ts when you have a composite cowl. Well, what I thought I'd do, since we've kind of added a few little items to this, I'm going to redo this next time I have to print these up. I thought I'd put on a couple of the tips that you might want to use when you have a composite part, a real panther cowl, or in case of you're doing even more. Just good tips. This is good, useful information. Now, several good ways I've found of finishing composite parts. On a small part, and this has worked well several times. Let's see, we may even do this on this part. You can basically just take the part, and this would be the cowl. You need to scuff it up with 80 grit paper, 80 grit or rougher paper. Now that looks awful. When you do that, you get a surface that looks all dull and grainy and gritty and everything, but it's the graininess of the surface that allows the first coat of finish to stick. Now, in our case, we can use Brodak primer. That's one of my favorite coatings because it gets down into the little rivers or ditches that you make with the sandpaper, and you get a mechanical tooth. It's called a mechanical tooth. Then, from sanding this out, you ultimately would have little teeth, because in these little ditches would be little teeth that the paint could attach to. But that's one good way of doing it. But the way I prefer even more for bigger parts is do the 80 grit sanding, fill the rivers with primer, maybe even leave on a coat of primer. In some cases you just want to paint right over the primer, but even better if you can take some medium grade silk span, get that over the top, and then build up the substrate on top of the silk span. Now the reason I like the silk span, it bridges any little gap or any little spots like this. It makes a bridge over it, and it makes the filling of the part go a lot quicker. Now you could do this, again, you could do this with 10 coats of primer, 3 coats of primer, or any amount. But when you have super light parts, the easiest way is just to do silk span. So what we're going to do, we're going to prime these parts next, see if we like the primer after we sand it off. See, there's just no way you can get away with having these little imperfections in here, but they all will fill in with primer. And once we have a nice coat of primer, we'll see if we need the tissue or don't need it, or if we're just going to be happy with the primer as our base for the finish. Before we finish this or put any finishing material on it, anytime you have plywood and there's an edge, whether it's on a cowling, now don't forget there'll be a lot of oil and grease and grit. Well, I like to seal the edge with some thin CA if possible. And I don't want to hit it with kicker, of course, but just wipe it with a Q-tip. That helps kick it off. So what that does, that seals that edge, gets us a good seal. And if I sand that down again, I'll reseal it with the thin CA, and I'll do that before I put any finish on this. Now by finishing these up really carefully and in a detailed way, and not having any extra material going along for the ride, what I've been able to do is get the weight down to just about 15 grams, which is maybe a tad over, actually less than a gram over a half ounce. Now that's what's significant about that is that's half the weight of the B25 cowls. And I think if we can keep the finish to a minimum and not go crazy on the finish on this, we really do have a shot at achieving our goal weight of getting the weight down by 10%. I mean, we're really coming up on that in terms of getting other parts, component parts, less than the weight of the original part, and any part that's more is getting made over. We have a real nice light wing and a real nice light tail, and I'm really looking forward to working on that fuselage mold in the near future. Now that's ready for the finish. Once that's all sealed up, I'll reseal that up, but I want those plywood edges to be sealed. I don't want oil and anything, fuel getting in there, anything that can deteriorate that plywood. Anything on a cowling should really be just ultra sealed. Put any finish on here, needless to say. I'm going to take our degreaser M600, get off all the contamination, the sanding dust. Yeah, we're real happy. This is one of the parts I'm real happy with the way it came out. Using a little bit different method, a little bit different materials, but still building on the fact that we're making something very similar within 10% of the B25. Now I always start a Rodak primer even if I have it sitting for half an hour because there's a lot of solids in it. It tends to get down at the bottom. It's a good idea if you haven't used the primer in months to strain it, and since we've just done a mold last week, this won't be that chunky. But if you let it sit for a year or so, it just gets real chunky. Needless to say, what I do is I keep a dedicated gun just for doing primer. Just makes it easier to not have to clean the gun all the time, and we use it basically on a regular basis. After I just spray a coat on. It doesn't matter if you brush or spray it. In this case we had it in the gun, so it didn't matter. And what I'm trying to do is fill in all the little gaps. See how the primer falls down into the gaps? Because all I want to do is fill the gaps right now. I don't need to finish this, I just want to fill the gaps. And that's what helps fill all the little imperfections and gaps, and then when that dries, we'll put an ordinary coat of finish on it, primer or whatever. Any of the fillers, I'll just fill those little gaps in. And we're just going to let that first coat of primer dry, then we'll sand it down, try to see how many of the imperfections we can fill in. And then we'll decide if we want to put a coat of silk span on these, just to do a final little cover, because all of the parts always have these little chunks and imperfections and things in there. The next step was to just lightly sand down that primer so it stays. You can see it stayed in little holes. I'm putting some tissue on here. Don't need to worry too much about brushing out the wrinkles. And you don't need any pre-coats on a composite part because it's not going to soak into the wood. You just put one coat of clear on and go right into putting your little pieces of tissue on. Now see how nice in that area, how it bridges right over? And that's what we're looking to do. You just let it overlap wherever it happens to come out. It's not important. Once this dries, we can start putting on our coats of clear and sanding out, making a normal substrate. You could also use that, the equivalent of red lead, to fill in the little gap, the little imperfections, but I just find the primer to just be a quick way to do it. Put it up by the heating vent, and in 20 minutes you can sand it. Any of the wrinkles you get in here are not going to be a big deal. These will sand right out when we go to do the final sanding. And of course, always press it down with your bare hands, or in this case, bare gloves. Gives you some real good adhesion. Now here's where Rodak dope is one of my favorite friends. The heat is on, and you can see how this has evolved. The primer has filled in all the little divots. The tissue has basically bridged anything else. What I'll do is I'll put 5 coats of clear, there's the joint. Put 5 coats of clear on this, roughly. With the heat on like this, 20 minutes between coats. When that's all done, that'll be ready to be sanded out, but I'll usually just let it sit overnight or for another day. We're not in any rush. Once that's done, I'll have the base of my finish, and then I'll be ready to put the silver filler on there. But that is really, the whole trick is the Brodak dope. Anyway, while I'm talking about Brodak dope, I mean, this is funny. We have a friend, Dan Fish, who's building a Cardinal, and I introduced him to Brodak dope, and he was real skeptical. Oh, I have some other stuff to use up. It broke his heart to have to buy some Brodak dope. I got a call the other day. I thought the guy was in heaven. He says he's just having the best luck. And we should have pictures of his plane soon. He's already in the finishing process. If you've not used Brodak dope, try it. I really guarantee you'll like it. Comes in today's mail for Chicky. Chicky, nothing. How about for Windy? There better be a female bird in here. Chicky's not excited. He wants to see what we got. Help keep Chicky from getting lonely when you're working on your 826. Oh my God. Chicky, you're in trouble. Oh no. From Bernie Trent. Oh no. Chicky, this is so disrespectful. I bet Chicky's going to be afraid of him. He's a Baltimore Oriole. Oh my God. Oh, are they cool. Hold him to introduce him to his new friend. Oh, he doesn't like him. Chicky, he's your brother. You gotta like him. Chicky, stop it. Oh, he doesn't like Bernie. I'm sorry. Chicky is hurt. Hey, he's pretty nice though. Maybe I'll keep him and dump Chicky. Now, what I've seen in the past, he gets used to we have birds all over the house. He gets used to them after a while. We'll give him some time. Bernie, thanks a whole lot. That's great. These 2 birds, and these birds are a little quacky. He doesn't like these birds, by the way, at all. Another one he hates. He's jealous. Anyway, we put Bernie's bird is in his cage, but I don't think Chicky's going to go in his cage for a while. I don't know. Chicky, I don't know about this. Anyway, back to working on our cowlings. A couple of coats of dope dry. What I like to do is just scuff it, and I say scuff it. I want to show how little sanding you should be doing here, just to get the joints and wrinkles out. Let me come right out. Right here. Then we're going to try to give it probably another 3 or 4 coats of dope. So nice that's all filled in. That's about all the sanding it'll need, and then a couple of more coats of dope. Well, Chicky's in his cage now. I don't know. He flew in there, but he doesn't see the big bird up there. Chicky, he's your brother. He's your brother. You're breaking the cage, Chicky. Chicky, Bernie would have his feelings hurt so bad that you don't like that bird. What? What was that? Do you want to say anything to Bernie? Bernie, I'm sorry. Bernie will die when he finds out the bird. Oh, man. No wonder we're not getting much done here. But anyway, just a light sanding. And this is critical too. Starting right now, we're going to break the edge so that we get a nice radius fit on that edge. Even though the parts look pretty rough now, once we get a little substrate of a finish on there, they'll start to look a lot more like what we expect them to look like. Just the slightest little sanding here, just to kill the hairs in the silk span. And that silk span really does a great job of bridging. That was one of the tricks that I found early on in making carbon parts. Silk spanning them really saves a lot of weight, and in fact you don't have to fill in all the little gouges with any of the filler materials, the epoxies. The dope is a tenth of the weight of the epoxy. So in essence you're filling them with primer, or in our case with Brodak dope. And we're ready for another coat of dope. Well, we had to take the bird out of Chickie's cage. Chickie's not happy. He's not wanting to share his cage with a stuffed Oriole. Anyway, we're going to just keep getting coats on this. With the heat up in the house, boy, this stuff just dries up 20 minutes, half an hour tops, and you can go right to the next coat. What an asset to be able to get a finish done this quickly. We're going to be getting a substrate on this in the next day or so. Brings back memories of how bad years ago you'd put one coat on and basically you were done for the day. Got to let it dry overnight, or in some cases 2 or 3 days, and you kind of lost enthusiasm for a lot of finishing projects. I'm sure I'm not the only one that ever lost interest in it. Anyway, that's 5 coats of dope, 6 coats, a little sanding, and just a dusting in between coats, and we'll be ready to put a real substrate on there. First thing I want to do today is get a coat of silver on these cowls. This is just to show me where the mistakes are so I can start working on the filler coats. Got 5 coats of clear sanded between coats, which should be enough. Although once you sand through a few spots, then you resign yourself that you're going to have to do some little touch-ups. This is silver filler. It's got a little bit of talc in it. This will take 20 minutes or so to dry, and we'll be able to sand it out. And you can see, if you look at it real close, let's see if we can see the dry spot right there. Spot where it's going to need a little bit of work. But pretty much, these cowls are going to look pretty, I think they're going to look pretty nice once we get a final sanding, and we'll just get the base coat or the finish on them. And we hope that snow melts in the next couple of days. It has really been cold. Cold being out here. Now, because we can put these parts up by the heating vent, they dry relatively quickly. Now, when you get to this point, a lot of people quit and they say, oh yeah, that looks good enough. Well, you know, here's what the silver does. This is why we use silver. See the little spots? You would never see these if you don't go for silver. If you make the part white, you won't see that, or gray. The little pock marks, little imperfections. This is why we use silver. So what's going to happen now? I'll let this dry for a little while longer. You can see the dry spots where it's a little dry like there. What I'm going to do is, and of course this has talc in it, it'll sand real easily in 20 minutes or half an hour. Here's another little pock mark. But this is normal composite part finishing. Now, to make a case, what I did at one time, and I really had to do my own test. I don't like to take other people's data for it. I made a part very similar to this, but first painted the mold with gel coat, let it dry. The same way we made the mold. And it came out perfect. It buffed out. It was ready to go. The only problem is when I weighed it, it was 3 times the weight. A 10-gram part had become 30 grams. So, and obviously, these parts when they're done, these are under 15 grams now. So there is no way I'm going to pay that weight penalty of tripling the weight of my parts. That's just crazy. So what I'll do with these now is, I'll put them up by the heating vent for a little while longer, little dry spots. Being able to identify little imperfections like this. From this point on, we'll sand with 1200 sandpaper and M600. We'll be very careful with this. And we'll probably shoot, and I'll do it off camera because it really does get boring, sand a coat with M600. We could sand this wet, let it dry 20 minutes, an hour, put another coat of silver on. And after 2 coats of filler, 1 coat, we might not even need any more filler. We'll be ready. We'll be ready for a real coat of silver. Now, once it's got a real coat of silver on it, then I won't be doing much more with it, because when we bolt this up to the nacelle, which we haven't built yet, we're going to want to sand this right into the fuselage side, and I'll be really scuffing this edge up again. It'll need another coat of silver. So all I'm trying to do is prep my parts in silver that they're as good as I can make them before the final finish. And once I do the final finish, of course, that last coat of silver will get sanded out, and we'll use B25 silver, or we'll leave this coat of silver on, which is what we did with the B25, and just shoot the B25 silver on top of it. But either way, or we'll come up with a custom paint job. We may come up with something, that's the nice part, is you don't know ahead of time how it's going to come out. That's what makes this, to me, extremely interesting, is you never know where the project has a life of its own. It tends to go in directions you never even think about. But we've learned a lot just on making these composite parts. We've really radically got the weight down, and now the test will be, can we do the same thing when we pull that fuselage mold apart and make the fuselage parts? That'll be very interesting to see.
The mold's wrapped with saran. I'm not sure about that.
Was that a hardwood piece?
It's a piece of MDF with a piece of half round on it.
And he's managed to get everybody in the shop ammonia-ized. The bird's flying around crooked.
Good.
Well, you should see
time that bird did something.
You should see how afraid he is of that other Oriole that birdie Trent sent. Holy crap.
Okay, so now what we're doing is we're taking some hot water. We put it on this 30-second. And now what I'm trying to do is just get the excess ammonia off the surface. And I'll show you what, I have no idea whether this is going to work or not.
Well, that's what everything.
We're going to try it, Ollie.
It wouldn't be much fun if we knew it was going to work.
Right.
What fun would that be?
Okay, so here we have thinned white glue. Hope I got thinned enough. All right.
You're going to try to make a laminate. Now, what he's going to try to do is make a laminate. Put glue on one side.
The brush is too small. Tell you that right now.
That's my method of doing it. Just pour it on. Now, one thing good about this has gotten a smell of all the silver dope on these cowlings. We've been getting sick from the smell that he's putting.
Yeah, now when Karen...
Coat after coat.
Now when Karen comes home, you can blame it on me.
What I do is sand one coat while one is drying. While that's drying, I'm sanding this one, and I don't know.
Okay, so now we have this thinned white glue all over the place. And it's spinning, and I didn't want that. Oh well. Now
you got your
my carbon cloth. Here it is.
Carbon mat.
Which is a good sign.
How much did you thin that glue? 50-50?
No.
10%?
Not even
20?
close. Maybe 20.
Or you just did it like a cook putting salt in the chicken?
That's pretty much it. We got salty chicken here.
Accuracy is a way of life at the Demet household.
Yeah, right.
I'm glad I'm not going there for Christmas.
Pinch of salt. Oh, you want to come over? You'll get cold just like everybody else.
6 cans of beer.
I had 20 people to shop for Christmas. 1 ton of coal fit the whole thing.
Right.
One
you
shot.
Just ante up to the coal bin and get them all in one shot.
Take your 100 pounds of coal and get out.
All right, let's see how this is going to work.
Okay.
All right. There we go.
Come on.
Press-o-matic.
Now,
my thought was that you should make the 2 skins, let them dry, and then put the mat in, but Les figures give this a shot since we've never done it this way.
well, it saves some time.
Well, definitely. It definitely is going to save some time if you can do it in one shot.
Now, I got to tell you, if this proves to be substantially stronger than...
well, we're going to know tomorrow when you take it out of the mold.
Than 16th.
Well, Noel said this works pretty good. He was happy he made some parts with laminating them up like this.
My problem here, Hiram, is I need your hands at this point. So turning off the...
Don't ever. I can.
Whoa. There's got to be...
I run my operation with one hand. This is experiencing
No, I'm not.
bandage meltdown. No, you don't want this out where the part is. Put that on the bottom of the mold.
What?
This, where it ends, because there's a lump there, see?
Oh.
This goes underneath. You got, okay. I didn't know if you knew that.
Well, I didn't.
Good time to figure that out, though, because it'll definitely put a lump in the part.
Well, actually, the part that we want on this is the inside.
Okay.
There's got to be a better way to do this.
No, it's fine. Just put the piece down there.
Okay.
Put that piece down at the bottom. As soon as you wrap it once, it's sticky back, so it'll stick to itself. And they just go out to the, I mean, you don't have to put it under 1,000 pounds of pressure. It's thin wood. Put that up by the heating vent, and you're all set.
This is all rolled over.
Just roll it till it's out of Band-Aid. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't look like the end is real sticky, because I use that every day, that's probably all stickiness is off of it. Stick a pin in the end.
Just run a masking tape around?
Yeah, masking tape, whatever. Anyway, and while he's doing that and putting that part to sleep, I think we're on our about 5th coat of silver here, and it's really starting to look nice. Oh, the old Brodax here. Anyway.
I'm almost...
Okay, now obviously one of the things you can't do is imprint the wood like we did on the other side. But boy, you got a nice joint down there from the imprint, huh?
What? Oh, no, that's not imprinted. We imprinted the stab. These are the elevators.
Okay, but we wish we had a way you could imprint this. Well, not so much for us. I figure the way you might be able to do it is take a fake piece of wood and lay it down there.
Well, if you made a jig or a pattern,
yeah,
you could lay it out.
I don't think it's that critical. I think if you had just used, the other choices are obvious, ambroid or alphatic, or don't want to use epoxy for that.
No. Well, epoxy, actually, you have the most control over your set time.
But you got enough set time with this. Now you wet the wood on the ribs? Is that what you did?
Yep.
Okay, he's mixing his concoction. Always a little bit of water in the alphatic, just a little bit.
In this case, we got a lot. Too much. Put a little more alphatic in there, probably. Yeah, that's too much. That's thin as could be. That one.
Actually, this little method for making the elevators work real nice. I think that was a nice way to do it.
Well, it's one way to do it. There we go. And we're about right. Oh, I'm gonna need a bunch of these to get started.
Those are another thing we got from Tom Morris. They're very nice. Handy for doing this kind of work.
Oh, yeah. This one has seen better days.
The trick is with a Q-tip is turn it in the direction that they put the cotton on to begin with. If you go counterclockwise or counter Q-tip wise, it unravels.
And the trick is to just put enough, since this is thinned, we're not talking about a whole lot of weight.
It's thinned, and you have the wood itself. This edge is wet too, right? You put a little bit of water?
Yeah, yeah. So this is, actually, you can flow it on here without the danger of too much weight.
This is a lot more fun than sanding those coats of silver, that's for sure. Les always takes the easy job, if you ever noticed that.
That's right.
He grew up in a big family.
No, actually, I grew up with no brothers and sisters. None.
And you still became a conniver.
Yeah, that's right.
How did that work?
Oh, yeah, but I can't hold the candle. Can't hold the candle.
Well, they call me super conniver. If you grew up in my family, you'd know how to get an extra buttered roll for breakfast. All right, put that puppy to sleep.
Now, I can still feel the dampness that I put on this edge.
Okay, good.
Now this isn't going to seat quite all the way down, but I'm not concerned. It will at the tail, of course, but not. Alrighty. Wipe off a little excess here. Nice! Now we'll go a little inboard.
Elevator man.
We'll go a little inboard. Okay, we'll go against the taper, set it, and then very quickly move it down. You see what we did to make sure we got the...
Now, if you can, you're going to put this on a flat part of the table?
Yeah.
See if you can get it as far out to the end as possible so I can use this part of the table for laying out the plans.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do.
Yeah, that'd be handy.
Just don't...
Because I want to organize my plans.
Just don't knock it off, son.
We need to do our annual plan inventory. And we have to answer the phone. I'm thinking this is not the Lincoln log. This is like the Lincoln iron railing method.
Sure.
Who the hell is Tom Morris anyway? This the Lincoln log
Hey, you
method.
disturbed the warp there. What are you doing?
I'm going to put extra weight on it.
Oh.
God, if that part comes out crooked after all this bullshit, I don't know what to do.
It's lined up on two good rails.
Oh.
The interesting thing here is, I think
But it's still more fun than sanding silver.
I think it would be nice to get a couple of pieces of that, about 12 inches longer, just a little bit longer than the elevator. Lay them on there, and then just...
You can buy this in Home Depot for 50 cents for a 10-foot bar. They have this in Home Depot.
Yeah, I know. They have it at Sears.
Yes, see all these places. They make iron railings out of that stuff. Okay. Now, while we take a little break in the shop here, we're waiting for Mike Costello to come over and Les. They're going to try to do some repair work on a wing that, well, we'll show it up on the video, of course. But this is the main copy. This was a DVD that Bernie Trent had sent me, and I had to have it converted over, even though I have a DVD player. I don't have a way of actually doing it myself, and I thought I'd put a couple of minutes of this video on. Now, as always, one of the things I like to do is give these people a plug for the good work that they've done, and we're certainly not looking to steal their video, but give these people a call, 800-988-6488. Email Scott at sksvvideo.com. And this looks like it's just absolutely a really, really neat video. I've watched it a couple of times already, and I wanted to put some little clips on it as we're going through it. It's really a fun video. I think you'll enjoy it. This is only be a few-minute clip out of this, by the way, is a full 2-hour video. You know, some people, they kind of rip you off. You get 1 hour video on a 2-hour tape, and then there's an hour blank tape. Not this one. It goes right to the end, and it's worth having.
And I've been in modeling for about 45 years and recently retired, and so I thought I'd start off with the Bob Violet F-100 kit. It's representative of the Air Force Thunderbirds demonstration team. The airplane that was modeled is located in the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The model is painted with Bob Violet's metal coat paint. Probably have got about 800 hours in constructing the model. Everything is standard according to Bob Violet plans and instructions, except the flaps, which I converted to air over oil. So they're infinitely positionable, and they have as much power as two standard servos, or two high-end servos would if you use those on the flaps. It has a Pegasus AMT motor that puts out 28 pounds of thrust, carries over a gallon of kerosene for fuel, and it flies real well.
This is my Jet Model Products Firebird, done up in the Stars and Stripes for a little patriotic year here. It's a great flying airplane. Has a AMT USA AT450 engine in it, and very happy with it. And thank you very much.
What's it weighing?
It weighs, I haven't weighed it yet, but I'm guessing around in the high 30s, maybe low 40s for takeoff.
Happy with it?
Very happy. Flies like a pattern ship, except a little faster, and just having a good time with it.
California, and I built this F-86. It's a 5th scale. It was about a 4-year project. The model is powered by AMT Olympus. It's got a Futaba Zap radio in it. The airplane weighs 45 pounds. It's covered in Presto Chrome coverite. The tires, wheels, and brakes are by Glennis Aircraft. And basically the airplane flies very prototypical scale speeds, doesn't have any bad handling, and I would say it's one of the easier airplanes to fly. Easy to see in the sky also. Normally, between comparison of small airplanes to larger, I would think that the larger is far better. This is my son Neil over here. He does all the waxing on the molds, prep work. He does layups for the airplane. So pretty soon he'll be flying one of these here. And Scott, hopefully you'll get pictures of that for him, because he's kind of anxious to do that.
scale model of an Avro Vulcan bomber, British bomber. It's constructed all standard balsa and plywood type construction with fiberglass finishing on it. It's powered by 4 OS91s turning Dynamax fans. Weighs in at around 90 whopping pounds, so it's pretty heavy, but it's got a light wing loading, comes in around 37 ounces per square foot. And that's about all I can think
hope you enjoyed that little outtake. That is just, I just love that. I'm going to send a copy of that to anybody I know that really loves RC models. Wow, impressive stuff. Very, very impressive. Hope you enjoyed that. Now we're going to get back to the shop.
With that shtick with the lumberyard.
What are you going to do?
I just want to trim off the end of this to see what.
Yeah, let's see. Now this has the carbon in between two layers.
This has the lightest carbon mat between two with white glue between two layers of 1/32. And I want to see what the.
That's going to be part of your landing gear system.
That'll be the bucket on that goes around the landing gear plate.
Right. And you'll get a nice edge with that carbon in there. You just hit it with a little CA2. That'll make like almost like a 60-foot plywood edge. Let's see what that. Let me see the other side. The other side, you have sanded out already? Had that?
Yeah.
That molded right in there.
Yeah.
Oh, that looks nice.
Yeah, so this needs a touch more sanding on this side. Yes, sir. I didn't quite have the two pieces of balsa were exactly the same size, but they didn't line up perfectly. Put that piece of 1/8-inch sheet in the front.
Right, that was just as a jig.
Right, and also the 1/8-inch piece in the back. Well, we left that, and now had to sand the front edge down to take that 1/8 off. Otherwise, we'd
Oh, you'll have a flap that's a 1/4 inch, well, an 1/8 of an inch or something too big. Okay, so now you're going to put on that kind of 90-degree piece, is that?
well, gotta sand this first,
Oh, yeah, okay.
and then put on the.
Did you make that piece yet, or are you going to make a little fixture up to make it?
I got a router bit that'll give us a perfect 90. I'll
Okay.
run it in the oak, line it with the acetate,
And just press it.
and then just all you do is hold the two pieces in
Yeah.
and run the hot stuff down.
Beautiful. Well, you can even use that sheet Teflon and the CA if you use it, it won't stick.
Yeah, right, exactly. Exactly. Okay, so now there's a drawback in doing this a little bit anyway. And that is, you can see we've sanded past the, not that it makes a whole lot of difference.
No, it makes no difference at all.
But the diagonal...
That thing is
now
probably
has space.
plenty strong.
Oh, yeah.
Did I just hear something break?
Well, you didn't hear it break.
We ought to have sound effects in the back. Ah!
I just see a crack.
Yeah, that's okay. Did you weigh it?
No, I'm about to.
Okay. And you got the horn block in there already? Well, actually, the only thing you're missing is the leading edge.
My guess is
Just the leading edge.
My guess is that this will come in at about 12 and a half grams because I weighed it with the stuff on it.
Okay.
You know, and it's not final sanded.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's just,
So Mike Costello walks in, he brings the jig, what will now be known as the jig.
yeah.
Look at this thing. Now who made this, Hampshire?
Tommy made it.
Wow, look at this.
My design, Tom's doing.
Okay.
First things first.
Let's see how this works. Make me a part.
Well, if I had my router table here, I could make you a part.
Okay.
Now, we get stock. Stock is generally oversized. So what we
Okay.
did was we took and we set this rail back exactly a 1/2 inch from this edge.
Okay.
Now, you have a router bit sticking up through the router table, has a bearing here, and the exact diameter plus a few thousandths is the cutting head.
Okay.
Now, you take the piece of 1/2 inch stock, you put it in here, you clamp it down. All right? You run the bearing,
I got you.
you just guide this against the edge of the bearing on the router table,
I got
and
you.
it gives you precisely a 1/2 inch on this dimension.
Okay.
All right? Now, you do two adjacent sides. You don't do opposite sides. You do two adjacent sides. You turn out with something that's a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch and perfectly square. Now, we go to the other side. You know how we undercut motor mounts?
Right.
Depending on what shims you use here, you can undercut.
Yeah, because you put the side that you already cut against the dead stop,
Right.
so it's accurate. You're a pretty smart guy.
So
What do you think, Mike? He's smarter than he looks.
Whatever you want to do here, what you use is the appropriate shim. In this case, if you use the piece of 1/2 inch square motor mount stock
Okay.
with a piece of 1/2 inch basswood, which is incredibly accurate stuff. When you buy basswood, you put a mic on it, it's like within 2-3 thousandths. All right? Put a piece of 1/2 inch basswood here, clamp the whole shoot and shebang down. Now run that same router bit. You'll get a perfect 3/8 scarf with a 60-degree run out toward the front. And it's long enough that you probably have to cut it here, but in the meantime you have it machined from end to end.
Beautiful.
And this little thing is so you can cut, you get to the front end,
But you got to use you can only do this with your router table.
With the router table,
okay,
yeah.
you got to take it all. I don't have a router.
But see, that's the thing that makes it so precise, the router table.
No, I'm
Because
sure.
You've got a surface here, and exactly perpendicular, you have the cutting face of that.
Yeah, and you've got a dead 90 degree too.
Right, exactly.
But what happened, Mike Costello was here, he dropped off this wing, and what happened, because he was storing it, this is the original A26 wing that I made, where it's glassed, it's perfect, but out where it isn't glassed, the sheeting had little ripples in it, not terrible, but
Nor is
ripples.
it doped.
So what Mike did, and here's the little tip of the century, when you do a wing like this, if you're going to put it in storage, put 5 coats of clear dope on it or glass it. Now where it's glassed, Les, absolutely perfect.
Well, it's
Where it's, well, but out here it was really ripply. Now what happened, he brought the ring here, and in an hour and a half, what, about 2 hours?
Yeah.
You think 2 hours? He was in the cellar 2 hours. Now my cellar has a lot less humidity. Mike's cellar is kind of like a basement, a garage basement. As soon as the moisture got out of the wood, it's like when you can't open your door on a, I don't know about your house, but mine, on a rainy day, you can't open the front door. Then as soon as the rain stops, the humidity goes. So what's happening, that outside skin of the wood is getting bigger and bigger. As soon as the humidity dropped down, the wood laid right back down. But now we're not going to take a chance. We're going to take this tomorrow. Mike's going to come over before he goes to work and get some dope on it. And he'll do that tomorrow. Now, what are you going to do with your elevators? You have another trick for the elevators here?
Well, no, I'm just going to start to sand this down, but I think
Okay.
the other method for doing it, where you build it perfectly flat, with parallel top and bottom, sand it and skin it, will be...
Just be easier.
It'll be easier, and I can't see any difference in the weight.
Okay. And these came in within the weight, the 12 grams, 10 grams? What are they?
10.3, well, probably around 10 right now.
Okay, well, we don't care if it's 10.3 or 12.
I'm going to put the leading edge on. But
Yeah, as long as it isn't 32 or
Oh,
something.
no.
Yeah, you could live with that.
It's the same as what it was before,
Okay.
10.6.
But that is a key thing now we're going to be very aware of is, see, I never build a foam wing and then store it. I usually work on it right away. I've never stored one.
Right.
And the ones we have stored over there, the 5 or 6 of them that we have, what's happened, as soon as we've put the sheeting on, we've skinned them or doped them or something. Or kept them in this cellar.
Right.
So that's the secret, and that's what tomorrow Mike's going to work on that. We'll see. We'll see how this wing works out tomorrow. And tonight I thought I'd take this opportunity to discuss some of the things over the years, many years, that we've learned about foam wings. Step 1 would be, if you just get a foam wing, whether you get it from Johnny Duncan or from whomever, let me just start the little discussion here with anybody who doesn't live in a humid climate. Like where we live, it's humid, so we're used to dealing with humidity all the time. The other shop, if you look back at some of the videos that go back to '87, what happens is you see there's almost always water on the floor, very humid. Dealing with humidity is always a separate issue, but on a foam wing, it's even more critical. Now, let's start with tip 1. If you've just bought a foam wing, leave it in the cores. Don't take it out. That kind of protects it. And store it in a low humidity. Now this is what people do that makes a problem, is they buy a foam core in the middle of the winter and then work on it 9 months later. Meanwhile, it's sitting in a damp cellar, or even worse, a wet basement, or a garage, or an attic, or somewhere where you can't control the humidity. And this poor wing is just moving and twisting, and it's the best. In the best of all worlds, you would buy the wing on Sunday and sheet it Monday, and Tuesday cover it. Now cover it, I mean by that a finish. The thing that's happened to Mike is, and I'll go back over this, is my basement because we have a dehumidifier and we run it 24/7 because of our business and because of Karen's asthma and because we have a HEPA filter. I think that removes even some of the dust particles and things. We tend to have a low humidity situation. Well, what Mike had done, and this is really, I had sheeted the wing in this basement, and we had a couple little problems with it, but it was nothing terrible. Well, he took it, and for 3 months or 6 months, hung it on near a wet basement floor. Well, now the sheeting is all rippled. Well, as soon as he brought it back here yesterday, within an hour, and we have air heat too, which tends to dry everything out, that sheeting had basically laid back down. But that's still a problem. If it had a finish on it, it would be less prone to pick up the moisture. Now, just to make an example up, the foam, and I know a lot of people don't know this, anybody who cuts foam will tell you, when you buy a block of foam before you cut wings, you usually have to let it sit for weeks, because the foam itself picks up moisture. And if you ever want to hear about moisture, just speak to Johnny Duncan. When we were up at his house, he was on and on about the moisture problems that he has to deal with. Scott Smith had to deal with moisture. So it's the foam itself sometimes that has moisture in it. If the person who cuts the wing, and Johnny always knows about this, so I would assume that's never a problem with his wings, but if somebody just buys a block of foam, cuts a wing, and you sheet it, you've trapped in all this moisture. But it's just one thing to think about. Moisture. Moisture is a giant problem. Now, anytime you forget this, there's the door test. Just go to any wooden house, like this house, an old house, anybody's house, your neighbor's house, and try to open the door on a rainy day. Well, what happens, the door itself gets bigger in every dimension by, not a lot, but if you have an old house, it can be critical. And the door expands. That high humidity makes wood expand. So what happens if you have a sheet of wood and humidity is exposed to this side, if you understand how humidity works, the humidity doesn't go right through the wood and out the other side. It tends to stay on the surface. What happens? That piece of wood, that side gets bigger, and it airfoils the wood, which is exactly what has happened to Mike from having that wing in a damp cellar. Mike's cellar I wouldn't classify as damp. It's very damp. The low humidity would do the opposite. If you bring a piece of wood, and I had this happen on motor mounts, what I did years ago is John Gajewski cut me about 300 sets of motor mounts, and they were perfect. And what I had done, I stored them in an attic that had, for all purposes, no humidity. And they pretzeled out exactly the opposite. Now you would think that's not true. It is true. Humidity is not your friend. So the low humidity sucks out the moisture, shrinks the material. High humidity expands the material. So if you know how that's going to happen, in the best of all worlds, you'd like to, no matter what wing you have, and this, people don't realize this happens even to a built-up wing, a D-tube wing, a GO wing, you name a wing. This happens. Humidity affects everything. As long as we're talking about it. Humidity, heat. This happens in all wings. All wings. Heat affects them. If you looked at your plane, Billy Suarez has done this many times, you put your plane out in the sun. Let's assume this is a no dihedral plane. The sun is up here. Old Mr. Sun. Now, let's bring him down. What you'll find out, if you had a way of measuring it, is the heat that's exposed to one side of the wing. At the end of a hot day in the sun, this plane is going to have very slight wing droop. Tails, same thing, because the hot side, remember what happens, the hot side expands. Just heat anything up and you see if it expands. Slight, but it's still a factor. So what Billy used to do is when he'd take his plane out in the sun, he had his little carrier, and I've seen other people do this too. He either put it in the shade, which you see people at the Nats do all the time, or flip it over some of the time so it's equally exposed, thereby hopefully minimizing the damage or the twist that heat is putting into the wing. And it's putting stresses in that there's no way to get around that. There just isn't a reasonable way to get around it. Now, carbon wings are a little bit better in terms of picking up moisture, but they're not impervious to heat. If you heat them, they're no better or worse than a wood wing. I haven't found it to be better or worse, but certainly in terms of humidity, carbon is a better material. Well, but we know not everybody wants to make carbon fiber wings. Only a few of us are experimenting and playing and having fun. But if you understand humidity and understand heat, and it won't matter if it's even an I-beam wing, things are going to change from heat and from humidity. The two things that are always affecting your plane, no matter where you store it. Now, just a couple of storage tips. One thing, no matter where you live in the country, when you're not flying a plane, you have to store it. If you find an area in your home that's low humidity, it's worth walking up a few stairs or worth whatever the inconvenience is, as opposed to putting it in a very damp cellar or a place where like Mike has 20 or 25 models stored right near a wet, damp basement floor. The other choice you have, which I did years ago because of Karen's health issues, we bought a giant dehumidifier, and we run a dehumidifier 24/7. Well, yeah, that adds to our electric bill, and among other things, but the bottom line is, the planes, and Mike found that out when he brought the wing here, the planes relax. You don't build a lot of stress into the planes. So after putting a couple of 100 hours into a wing, a tail, a body, a plane, you don't take it off the wall at the end of the season and go to fly it and find out everything's warped and twisted and whatever. Now, if you don't have a low humidity area and you don't want to run a dehumidifier, there's probably places that are better than other places. Number one, I've noticed some people, like myself from time to time, and I'll put this in a WinStar. They put the plane in the back of the car on Friday night because they're going flying Saturday and Sunday. But here's what happens. Joe Adamusco had this happen. He put it in the back of, I think he had a Chevy at that time with one of the big back windows. And the big back window acted like a magnifying glass and bubbled up the paint on his Spitfire. Luckily, he had stored it upside down. He used to carry the plane upside down. So the big bubble that had to be refinished was on the bottom. Well, in a WinStar, we have this silver cloth that you can buy at any camping store. It's made for aircraft to put on the dashboard. It's silver on one side and red on the other side, and it totally keeps the UV off the plane. So if I store the plane for a couple days or at a weekend or go to a contest or Brodex, it's virtually always covered by that cloth, that UV protector. That keeps things from bending and twisting unnecessarily, and that's why some of my models, and certainly not all of them, but some of them years later tend to look like they're new models or relatively new. They don't show these age marks that a lot of models, after 1 year of flying, they look like they've been through the mill. Well, when I go up to the Spitfire bedroom, I like to look at the planes and think that they look like they're in almost as new condition. Well, but part of it is covering them up if they're in the car, low humidity storage. These are real simple things. These are really, really simple things that a lot of people, it's just really difficult to analyze when some people have a plane and they're real unhappy with it. A year later it looks terrible. Well, a lot of times this plays a big part. The other part is, Mike mentioned this yesterday, is the clumsy factor. We all have a clumsy factor. Now, when I used to take the B-25 in and out of the cellar door, believe me, there's about this much clearance in every dimension, and putting it in the car, and I realized, I could beat the hell out of it. So what I did is, like an example is where the nose of the plane is, I took and made a sponge cover. When people beat up the wingtips, make little sponge covers. Make really anything. Try to minimize the clumsy factor. But all these things, they all add up, they all take their toll, and if you try to minimize them, what you find out is the model will just last a lot longer. We all put too much time and effort into these models to just let them deteriorate unnecessarily. I hope those tips will be something you can use or something you can think about. Next time you store your model in the blazing sun, or just look at the Nats video, see how many people, the minute they're done flying, run to the tent and put it in the tent. And that's a smart thing to do. And by the way, a last thing. Gee, I didn't even mention this, and I spoke to Bob Gieske yesterday. You can call Bob Gieske. His daughter makes these great covers. Now, I can't use one on a B-25 because of the rudders. You can imagine what would happen to bend the rudders. But if you have a normal plane, and they cover the plane, and she'll even put your name and put a couple of stars on there because you're a superstar or a champion or something, concourse winner, whatever you want to have on there. And I've seen the guys use these blankets. They're a very soft material. Get it right from Bob Gieske, and they really do work well. And if I have in the future, if I'm flying a single engine plane, you can bet I'll have one of them. Anyway, the objective is when you spend this much time and energy and effort, try to keep the plane looking as new as possible for as long as possible. And I think those are pretty realistic tips that'll be useful to anybody. Especially keeping a plane out of the sun, and especially not storing it in a damp basement. And that doesn't even count. I just wrote a big article for Stunt News about storing lines, especially solid lines, in your basement over the winter. Wow. And you get out in the spring, and you don't see the corrosion, but it's there. Even 302 stainless corrodes in a high humidity environment, very slightly, but you still see that powdery, whatever you want to call it. That's oxidation, and it affects the line. So if you can afford a dehumidifier, pop for one. That's the bottom line. And pick up one of those covers, or get one of those Gieske covers. They would all be good investments in my book. Today, our friend, I'm opening up the mail here. Our friend Ron Lutz, he has, obviously, him and his daughter and his wife went to Oshkosh. And he sent me some video here of, I've never been to Oshkosh. It's one of my goals in life. Once I become wealthy and independent, which probably will be another 75 years, what I really want to do is, I'd love to be there in person. But this video just gives me a little taste of just how intense this is. And Ron, I really, really appreciate the video. This is really something special. It's beautiful. Ron concludes a letter with it. He says, taking a page from Wendy's videos, I didn't edit out my wife sleeping. As I'm watching this, there's quite a few cool things going on in Oshkosh. Not just the normal planes flying in and out. And Ron has his own plane, of course. Has flown it in and out. And there was some things about modeling here. I know since putting the whole... Jim Kruger, one of my friends, was there, of course. Anyway, he's working on a 40 Strega. My kind of guy. Anyway, we are enjoying watching this. We've watched it about 3 times already. And there are some good moments in it, Ron. Don't underestimate yourself. There's an air coupe in here I wish I had. I had never realized about Oshkosh is just how big it is. How many I've been watching this for hours, and it just never ends. It's so gigantic. And there's just one thing after another that's interesting. Anyway, Ron Lutz, I appreciate it again. Thank you. Good entertainment while we work on our models, do the redundant and sometimes boring work of being in Wendy's shop. It just never ends. It's just hour after hour of this. And there's an air coupe in here. I've already passed it. There's an air coupe that I'm telling you, I get chills just thinking about it. If I still own my air coupe. Fly out to Brodax, land in that little grass strip next to Brodax. Would that be fun? Anyway, Ron, appreciate it a whole lot. This is good luck with your Strega 40. Many things I want to do with the time I have left, and this is one of them. Believe it or not, Warren Walker just went for a ride in I think a P-51, a Warbird anyway. Now don't be surprised if on a future Windy video you see some Windy at Oshkosh videos, and I would love to. Reno is on my list. Oshkosh. So many things I wish I had time to do with the rest of my life. Go to VSC a few times. There is so many things in the world of aviation, model railroading. Owning, now, you know, I'm never going to own a Mustang, so in my income bracket, you couldn't own the landing gear bolts, but this looks like such a great time. But even Karen would enjoy this. I mean, we've been up in, Karen's been up in gliders with me, and she bought me that AT6 ride years ago. I just think, look at this. Hard not to want to be there. Oh yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't enjoy being in Oshkosh at all. Ron, I can't tell you how many times we've watched this over and over here. I've been watching this all night. Now, I had a little bit of time here, and I was thinking one of the things I could do is pull one of these molds apart. This is certainly not going to be a 5-minute job, but this is fully cured now. Really not that delicate either. We're going to have to, little by little, chip out all this wood. Maybe even soak it in some hot water, because we're not looking to really save the plug. I don't think I'm going to need it. I think this will be a good mold. Well, you better hope it's a good mold, or you're going to be a year behind here. Anyway, I stayed up last night. It was funny, as I stayed up last night to watch this show on public television about the Great Train Adventures, and it brought back a lot of memories of when Karen and I went on at the 614. There's the 614 now. Making a copy of that for Ed Cotton. I think he'll enjoy that. Anyway, we're going to start pulling this apart. I expect maybe Les or Mike or both will come over and we could work on their projects, but in the meantime I can fill in with a little bit of work on pulling this apart. There's nothing sophisticated about pulling this apart. Of course, we would like to save the plug, but I know the reality is that's probably not going to be possible. So getting rid of the balsa that's around it very carefully. Of course, I don't want to scratch the mold or hurt it. And I would just say, from having done this before, you almost always wind up at some point in time just taking it and soaking it in a bathtub of hot water. Or if it were warmer outside, we could put it in a garden hose. But little by little, I'm just going to chip. There's no point putting this whole thing on video. We're just going to chip away at this, dig out as much as we can. This part is not pretty or fancy, and if you're delicate enough, you don't hurt the part. If it gets real difficult trying to pull it, the next choice is fill a bathtub with water, let it soak, and then start pulling out. The same thing with wet wood. Just trying to clean the edges of this up. Don't go any further. Does it just cleans up some of the loose stuff off the edge, just make getting the plug out just a little bit neater and easier. Okay, the next step is here we're going to go fill up the jacuzzi, fill it up with some hot water, let this sit in the hot water for a half an hour or so, and we'll work on some other projects. I've found that when you're impatient, it just takes longer. Hot water, the hotter you can make the water, the better. If it's summer, you can do it outside. Today it's frozen. Just really not going to be able to do it out there. But just letting it soak. Eventually the water, again, that humidity thing. The water expands the wood, and it should, in theory, it should come out a lot easier than if we try to pull it out dry like this. Just makes our job a little bit easier, and we can let the hot water do the work. Before I soak this in a bathtub, I wanted to pull this balsa lip off, because what I want to happen is the water to go in there. And I found two good ways to do this. Pulling this lip off with a razor blade went kind of slow, but I wasn't gouging everything up. What happened when I tried to use this, I tried to use the table, it just got, I was afraid I was going to gouge it up, and I don't want to gouge this up. When you think how many hours I have spent trying to get this nice. But it doesn't matter how you get the wood out as long as you're not looking to save it. Of course, sometimes you want to save it, but in this case will not be necessary to save it. And I got the water running in the tub, so I guess that justifies having a jacuzzi. It's hard to convince Karen of that, I guess. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But anyway, just to get that, this heavy lip of wood just isn't doing anything, and to get it down to where it's like this, and then what we'll do, they'll just fill that tub up, get the water as hot as possible, and let this soak. Whoops, gotta get the phone. You go back on the videos long enough, and we're still running water in here. What I did, I let a half a tub of water run, then drained it because it wasn't hot enough, and this is strictly hot water here. As soon as we get enough water that we can lay the mold in, I'm sure Karen would have a heart attack if she saw this is what we're doing in the hot tub here. Get in a hot tub with your mold and have some fun today. I don't think Karen would go for that. But then again, Karen doesn't know everything in the evil world of model planes. I'll bet right now Buzz Brodak is thinking, Wendy, you devilish dog, putting your mold in the jacuzzi. I know that jacuzzi that the Brodaks have, you could put a car in. Buzz, I'm thinking of you. Anyway, if you don't go back long enough to when a lot of this bathroom I built on video, and we turned this when we first bought the house, we did this all on video. I don't even want to think about it. It was so long ago. That must mean I'm going to be almost 60 years old soon. Look at this. As soon as the mold goes underwater, it's half underwater now. This is boiling hot water. This is as hot as I could make the water heater. I turned the water heater up. I guess it's about 190 degrees. We're going to let that soak, and while that's soaking, I'm going to go do the same thing with the big part. Cut the edges off with a saw, with a grinder. Strip off that little piece of wood. Let this soak, and then hopefully that'll soften up all the PVA that's on there. We'll be able to pull most of that out, maybe in big chunks, maybe in one piece, or maybe we'll just not be able to pull it out. I don't know. It's all in the luck of the draw when you're a molding specialist. Anyway. Yeah, while that's soaking, I'll basically do exactly the same thing. Again, I got to trim all this extra material. You can even do it with a jigsaw, with a Dremel tool. Anything, get rid of all the paper, get rid of all the extra wood. And we'll do that off camera because it's going to be redundant. And then we'll basically just throw that up in a bathtub and let it sit there the rest of the day with this water as hot as possible. And if it's not hot enough, one of the things you can do is boil up a tea kettle of water and make it even hotter and pour the boiling water right on the part itself. We've tried a lot of different ways. The water, the moist, funny we just talked about that humidity thing. Water and wood, once that wood absorbs the water, it just starts moving and getting unstable, and usually you can get it out without a big problem at all. And that was something I learned that the hard way right in the beginning of making my first and second little molding projects right away, is that thing of not being able to get the part out. Boy, can that ruin your whole day. Anyway, I hope we're going to have good luck. Well, we hope we're going to have good luck. We'll see what Chicky says about this. Chicky, are we going to have good luck? Are those parts going to come out? It depends if you stop teasing me with that crazy Oreo that's up on a Christmas tree. Yeah, I know, Chicky. I know. Hey, go work on your crazy mold. See if I care. Chicky, do you care if I have that mold, if that mold comes apart? You don't care. As long as I feed you. Feed you and let you poop on Saddam. That's all that matters to a bird. Okay, Mike's we mixed up a batch of 50-50 Brodak. He's gonna go out in the driveway and start getting some of these on. And while it's drying, we'll go out to lunch. It seems like that wood is staying down now. And you got no humidity today. Today's a perfect day to do this, hopefully. Hope it doesn't, it's supposed to rain tomorrow too. So try to get these at least 3 coats on, and then we'll see what that looks like. We'll sand it out a little and be ready to, put another coat and tissue it, I hope.
Half of this yet.
Now what we're doing here is Mike has, as with coats of dopa drying on a wing, he's got plans to Alan Seacat's plane, one of the guys from years ago. What's the name of the plane, Miss Laura?
Miss Laura.
And he's trying to lay it out. It's going to have a 40 Rojet with a pipe to see how much he needs to extend the fuselage
How
down
many squares?
to hide the pipe. You only got to go 3/8 of an inch maybe, Mike.
It's like a Genesis 46.
Yeah. Looks like a Gene Schaefer plane
All
to
right,
me.
Genesis 46 with short tips. Well, we can calculate the square.
Foam wing?
Yeah.
Whoa, this is going to be sweet.
I gotta get a copy of this up to Johnny Duncan. He's gonna...
3/8 of an inch would do that, and you wouldn't even see the pipe from the side view. That's pretty nice.
Totally hidden.
Extra 3/8 of...
I think they already have templates to this, Mike.
Sure he does.
If you send them up the plans.
He needed a
15's a little short. 15.
How much different than rotor wing is this, Les?
Thinner.
It's
And
thinner?
longer.
Thinner and longer. It's a lower aspect.
Different
Okay.
aspect ratio,
A
yeah.
much lower aspect, yeah. Yeah, lay one of our cores on here, maybe not be that totally different. Because if you do, here's the thing, if you get Johnny to cut a wing, well, you'd have to make new templates. Do that thin coring thing. That would be nice, but obviously Les already did it, but it's for our wing. Uh-oh, out comes the calculator. This is going to be... Don't you feel like you're buying a used car or something?
What do you think I brought this here for? I can't figure any of this stuff.
I feel like I'm buying a car. Do you want power steering? Oh, I got the calculator out. Oh, you want paint on the car, or should we leave it in primer?
I already built the stab, so whatever we do has to go around the stab that I already built. I'm not making another one.
No new stabs, okay.
May go a little longer on the fuse.
You let Les handle it, baby. He does this like a surgeon.
Although...
I can see stars in his eyes when he's doing these things.
All right, that's interesting. Low aspect ratio wing, high aspect ratio stab.
You know what I think, Mike, though? A plane where the pipe sticks out is the ugliest thing in the world. The pipe should be inside the body. Les agrees, too.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, that looks so crude when you see something just hanging out the bottom. That looks just unbelievably awful.
All right, using the Fancher 1.8 tail to nose moment.
What Fancher 1.8? It's Windy 1.8.
The hinge line.
Forget about Fancher. Fancher who?
You just line back there?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which is 2.5 inches further back. Now, he used a...
Can we put a Busso cowl on it?
Oh, we can put any kind of cowl on there you'd like. Wendy, you got a piece of paper here, or a piece
Mylar?
of drafting vellum?
Sure.
No, I don't want to use Mylar. It's too expensive to do a
What do you
sketch.
care? It's for Mike. Mike's money's not like he's going to buy us lunch today. What are you worried about? In the middle of a beautiful sunny day, Mike is getting on his... This is the second coat, Mike, or third?
Second.
And we have the day, you can't imagine. Look at these poor...
It's a nice... Today
Check.
we can fly for heaven's sake.
Check this out. These guys are working on a roof up here. Mike, I think you should get a job as a roofer. I think we can get you a job, make a few bucks. What's more fun, building model planes or doing roofing? Come on.
No, I don't see myself as a substitute for Uncle Dennis.
No, you keep Dennis out of this.
Way too sober.
No, you can't be sober and be a roofer. Come on. You'll never succeed. Let me go get the phone. Next step on our list of things to do, Les is going to turn this perfectly good table saw into... What are we going to turn this into?
A perfectly good table. Which is why...
It was before I got it. This is made by Sears. I thought this was Dremel. This is actually serious now.
I think Dremel used to make the same thing.
Yeah, and they put their decals on it.
Slightly different table, and they put their name tag on it.
This is a saw that Don Patterson's father gave me when he was liquidating his business, and he passed on not long after that. So I've always treasured having it. and I use it to do bell cranks and motor mounts and different things like that, but it's time. I guess you've seen the blade has made a few cuts, huh?
Yeah, and a couple of teeth I've even seen granite, I think.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, nothing I would do.
Oh, no.
Nothing I would be responsible for. Don't throw that blade away. We need that to make bell cranks. And Mike's still outside putting dope on that wing?
Yeah.
Look at us. He's the artiste at work. What a guy.
One more panel.
All right.
We got 3 coats on.
3 coats, then just let it dry overnight.
When it gets wet with the dope, you got a little ripple, and then
But it's going to dry. Yeah.
you dry it and press it back down.
Just hang it in the garage till it doesn't stink, and I'll bring it in tonight. Oh, that's fine. That's looking good. You want it to have, before you silk span it, and we'll just sand it just a little bit, you want it to just have that little sheen to it. You know, just a little sheen. It'll be fine.
You think that would be a, you can have that with 3 coats?
Well, I usually 3, then I dust sand it. Well, just dust it, not a real sanding.
This guy wants to be part of the finish. It's so warm out here, we gotta fly.
Look at this. He loves Brodak dope. Dun 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 dun.
Here,
You gotta,
I got him to move.
you didn't like the smell of that dope, huh?
Not as nice as dog poop.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's looking good. Can you imagine 2 bombers at Brodak's? Have a goal. 2 bombers at Brodak's.
Oh my God, we're gonna finish these by Brodak's?
I want to see 2 of these at Brodak's, not one. And maybe the B-25 too. We'll have to rent Al and Mary's truck to bring them out there. What did they do? Buy that trailer? Is that what they carry all that junk around with?
Yeah.
That's a pretty neat setup they had.
Oh, it's a nice, and
I may have to get one.
that van is not small.
Yeah, I know. They're like Banjack, though. They bring everything in the universe out there with them.
Probably camp in it too.
And sleep in it, yeah. I'm not that crazy about it.
I dig.
Just put it on. Don't play. Put it on. In this weather, that'll dry up. In this kind of nice warm weather, 20 minutes. We have our molds out of the bathtub. Looks like most of this stuff is going to come out pretty reasonably. Some of this is coming right off as we just touch it. Les is cleaning up the saw for, we're going to be going into,
I'm cleaning this up. I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it home, and you're never going to see it again.
he says
When
I'm
you-
a butcher.
When you need something cut, stop over to the house. I'll cut it for you.
I hope Ed Cotton sees this. Ed, he's doing this just to impress you.
No, I'm not. No, I'm
He
not.
took my beautiful saw and he's cleaning it. I want production tools, not pretty tools.
What, the only thing you could produce on this,
And more dust.
the way you had it set up,
Ah,
there was.
come on. How are you supposed to have any fun around here?
Do I look like I'm having fun?
Yes. Well, I'm going to have some fun right now. I got to clear the table and start pulling out the wood.
Okay.
This is fun.
I paid.
Always the part that Les loves. We take this tool, we get in here, we chop away and get some of the wood out. And sooner or later, you'll hear a pop. What happens is you break the vacuum. And then the part usually will come out, well, I know Les is loving this. Oh, here we go. And
You could almost make another mold from that.
we could, but we don't have to, and we don't want to, but we could. And I'll save this until we have a bunch of fuselages made, especially being Mike is getting psyched to work on his right now. And what I'll do is I'll trim some of this extra off, just carefully get rid of it. Of course, the mold will need to be cleaned and polished, but this is a lot more fun than rebuilding the saw.
Nothing's more fun than rebuilding the saw.
Some people look at a tool and they say, oh, what a nice shiny tool. I look at a tool and I want to know how many parts it made.
No. Don't give me a bad reputation here. I'm just trying to make this usable again.
But of course, the answer to that is some people have nice tools and build planes too, so I'm not sure which are we good or bad or what?
Do is make this usable again.
I think we could dress this up if we had to make another part. This would be, we got a lump here, and it's a lump from pulling out the pieces, but or we could make one of those highlight things, you know, those things the Spanish guys do.
Cessna?
Is that what they call it?
Yep.
This is messy work. Not a, The next step on this is going to be to take out all, and this will usually come out with no problem at all, the little pieces of wood. And then we will get out our Gorham's polish. We'll wet this out. See, this, the PVA will come out with water. And we will then sit here and polish away, polish and wax, and reverse the PVA. Now we want to put PVA in the mold, not this coat, of course. We want to clean it, PVA it, polish it. It's going to be relatively labor intensive. But when we're done, this looks like we're going to, and of course right up to this minute, you never know if you're going to get the part out. So this is like in a football game when you know they sound the bell that the game is over. And that's a lot of hours of work to get that piece, but that certainly, we'll be able to make some nice fuselages from that. And we'll do the same thing with the big piece, the big one. The big guy will be next. We're just going to chip away, chip away, chip away. Ed Cotton is really impressed. Ed, the only reason Les is doing this is to impress you. He thinks he's impressing me. I am impressed.
No, you're not.
I'll be impressed if he forgets to plug it in and can't get it running. All right, you work on the saw. I'm going to finish up these moles. That saw has made a job. You just need to let some water sit by the PVA. Let it sit for a minute or two. You can even throw it back in the bathtub, except we drained all the water. And the PVA, little by little, you can see it's going right back to being white. There it is. It's done. What I'm trying not to do, see, I always get tempted to start using one of those spongy pads or something to get it out. If you're just patient and you do it with your bare hands, the surface is now polished. It's very, very smooth. It's as smooth as the wax and the PVA was. So in essence, the reason I'm doing this on camera, I wanted to show that part. Now see, you've got the part that was that had PVA on, and look at the finish you have on that. And of course, if you're real careful, when you clean that up, you'll have that finish on the whole part. Whole part? I'm gonna make a mold of you, Chickie. Anyway, I'm real happy. I think by the end of the night, and we got another hour or so to clean these molds up, I think I'm going to go to bed tonight knowing that these molds are going to make some really nice airplanes. And we'll have a saw. That'll be even nice if we can have a saw that not only makes parts, but looks nice. We're going to basically be finishing this up tomorrow. It's a long day. We got to take our kitty back to the animal hospital, our son and daughter's cat. He's in for his third operation. Unbelievable, but just before Christmas, we're getting hit with all these medical things for our poor kitty cat. But anyway, we'll finish pulling this mold apart. We got the first one apart, and it looks beautiful. So I think we're really in good shape. And as of tomorrow, we'll have some molds ready to start prepping and making some parts. Now, I let this part sit. I actually let it sit overnight last night, thinking it would be easier to get out, and you can see what's happening. It's peeling away, but it's really I've just been taking it out piece by piece by piece, and very carefully. Now, because I have it fiberglass, it's hard to get some of the pieces out the way I want, but it's certainly not going to come out in one piece. And I think what I'm going to do later today is just let this soak a little longer while I work on some of the other projects. The other one came out a lot easier. This is just very crude. Anyway, you can get an idea of what this is, and then when I get to the bottom, I'm just going to peel this away. And you can see one of the things that's nice to have is a spackle knife that's really worn out so it's not sharp. Because what you can do is kind of get in there, and it just lets the water get down by the PVA a little more. And I'm working on this little by little. This is probably going to take longer than I thought. I actually let this sit overnight, and I thought it would pop out a lot easier. But because it's such a big mold and it's got a lot of curves in it, you've got to just spread this apart. Let that water get in there and soften up the PVA. And the worst that can happen, we're going to go mix up some boiling water, put it back in a tub. But if you keep chipping away at it, you find eventually you can get it out. The first time I did this, and I thought, wow, I'm never going to get it out. and I started gouging around with screwdrivers. Now, a soft spackle, or a soft spackle, has no sharp edges. The best way to get that out. And if it takes the whole day, I don't care. Tonight is Christmas Eve, so we're going to have a short day here, and I maybe get this out, maybe not, I don't know. But if not, I'll let it soak another day. The wood eventually becomes wet and just gets easier and easier to take out if you just be patient. Found handy was, and I took all the sharp edges off of this, because basically this is butcher work. And I don't want to run the chisel and scratch it, so I basically resigned myself to a little bit slower method of just pulling out the pieces chunk by chunk. And this method, as slow and tedious as it is, if you just keep taking the pieces out, it's like being a termite. Eventually you get down to where there's very little left. By the way, what was a really good idea on this was the fiberglass cloth, because it really gives me something. The chisel runs into the cloth but doesn't go through into the mold. The flat chisel anyway. And what I just wanted to show, so if somebody gets to this point, this just turns into a very labor-intensive job, but the alternative is terrible, is you won't get it out at all. And we will eventually get it out. Now, as I get further and further in, this is an 1.5 inch block here. What's happened is it's dry, so I could even, if I have to, I'll let this sit again. It's not a problem to let it sit. This would be a nice time to have a helper. The idea is not to scratch or in some way ruin the finish of the part. If we just keep getting chunks like this out for the next hour, well, I guess we'll have most of it. Try not to run anything into the surface. And we just have, you can see what's coming out of here. Snowing balsa wood. But it's coming out, little by little by little. Well, this took a lot more than I thought it would, but persistency pays off. Now I got to do this. I'll do this off camera, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this over to the sink and polish it, get all the PVA out, all the little chips of wood, they'll float right out. And then the next step is going to be to radius and clean all the edges. So there's no sharp edges. You can see I chopped myself up a little bit here. These edges are razor sharp, and I've got to get them to where they're a little bit of a radius. But that's all going to be, I hope, very soon. Well, right here we have the first piece. We actually could start doing the polishing on that. But what I decided to do, because it's Christmas Eve, I'm just going to take my time here and get the wax on and the polishing, and basically dedicate the rest of the day just to getting the molds prepped. And probably within a couple days we're going to have fuselage parts. Now that I've worked on this for an hour or so, there's a couple of things with all molds that I think you should know or be aware of in this one, because I just cut myself. Wherever there's a little fiberglass hair, I'm going to take a sanding block, but I'm going to answer the phone first. Get rid of these hairs or all these razor sharp edges, otherwise you wind up chopping yourself up. Let me get the phone. Now you can see another thing, like right up here, these little hairs, they really need to be sanded down or just hit with some sandpaper or the Dremel tool or whatever. But the biggest thing, all these little sharp edges, I don't want to have this that, here's the problem, if you get a little cut in the glove and the epoxy gets in there when we're making the part, it can really be a mess. Now these really look nice, they really came out nice. If I look at this mold, I think this is really no better or worse than the best ones I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of molds. Now keep in mind that when you work for a big company with thousands of dollars of resources, yeah, you can probably make it fancier or better. One of the ways of making this better would have been that maybe here, or at a couple of spots, sink in some little pieces of tubing or eyelets. Then inside the mold, when you lay it up, just put a piece of tape in there. Now what that would have allowed me to do would be to put some air pressure in here and help blow the part out. You basically, if you look at the garbage, you can tell it was an ordeal getting that part out, but it's still a simple ordeal. It's not a complicated ordeal. And just, in my case, I just sit here and watch TV for a couple hours and chip away at it, try not to scratch the mold. But it was a long time coming. But at this point, I am anyway, I am very, very relieved. You can see the finish that's in there. That's going to polish up real nice. The reason is, up until this point of time, up until right now, we didn't know if we're going to get that part out. And of course, if we destroyed this part, and this mold had a big gouge, or it was crooked, or bent, or twisted, well, it'd be a problem. We'll probably never get it back again, or we'd have to make another part. But now that we have that out, we're at a watershed part of building a model. And what it's going to allow me to do is probably somewhere down the road, well, we already have Mike Costello building his plane. He's already got dope on the wing, in fact. And we still have to work on a couple of those humidity issues. What I've been doing is I've been hanging it up by the heating vent, but while I'm working, it's in the way. We're going to let it dry for a couple of days before we work on it again. It looks like we got about 90% of it taken care of just by sealing up the wood. But keep in mind, that's an excellent tip. But anyway, here we are. This part is ready for the polishing operation, which I'm not going to do right now. I'm going to put this aside. It's I'm just as happy as can be, and I think Mike and I and anybody in the future that would like to have some of these parts, cowls and fuselages, and build along with us, or build their own variation. I'm wondering if Walt Brownell, for instance, could use a body like this and make a scale wing. Just gives us a lot of choices. So I'm not unhappy in any way with the way this mold turned out. It's a day before Christmas, and we're all kind of in a festive mood. So hoping we're going to be polishing this up later today after we do the day's work, get it all polished, cleaned, maybe even the PVA, and then have a real nice Christmas. Really have been, I guess, happy about is that each time I make a mold, every time that I've ever made a mold, I learn something that I can, number one, add to my knowledge of doing this, and number two, I can pass it on, and the video is such a good medium for passing it on. Anyway, we will see you on the next tape. It's Christmas. Well, it's the day before Christmas, and even though you'll get this tape after Christmas, let me wish everybody a really, really Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, a great 2004. We're already thinking about the trip to Texas, the Brodac 2004 flying, and I guess in our own way, getting Mike and my A26, getting Les's 40 ship out, getting some work on the electric ship, and just sharing the time and the life we have with the friends we have through the videos. And thanks a lot for joining us this whole year. It's been a great year. And we're really looking forward to the future like never before. And you notice Bernie Trent's Oriole decided he'd stay on the tree rather than fight it out with Chicky downstairs. Chicky is scared to death of him. Now that's just unbelievable. There's his little button. This guy is so cute. Bernie and everybody, have a great Christmas. We are all blessed. I heard from Father Regis last night. We're all saying a prayer for John Brodak's brother who's seriously ill. And let's hope we're all healthy in the years to come.
Yes,